January 1st, 1898, New Year's Day, I was born. Born right here where I live, Vale, North Carolina. I was born and raised right here. We lived on a farm. There was 11 of us in the family. My brother Robert, the oldest one, was 20-some years older than me. Now, farming has always been hard, but back when I was growing up, it was much worse than it is now. There was the animals to take care of, and there weren't no tractors like there is now. My daddy used a mule or horses to farm with. Daddy would start in the spring, plowing the land. He had a big old turning plow. He followed that old animal around the field, turning over that soil. Then a few days later, he had to go over it with a cultivator plow or a harrow. After that, Daddy would use the layoff plow to lay out the rows for the cotton or corn or whatever. The women would have to help plant the seed, along with their cooking, cleaning, and washing and ironing. It was a lot of hard work. We raised wheat to eat, and June was the time to cut it. My daddy would cut wheat. He'd been the mean one of cutting the wheat. It's the awfulest job, worse than picking cotton, binding wheat. It's hard to look at them paintings without smelling the wheat and feeling my thumbs swelling from binding the sheaves of wheat. It nearly killed you. We'd bind it in bundles and then carry it down in piles and shuck it. Then let it stand there to get cured out good. After that, we'd haul it in a wagon to where the threshing machine would come round and they'd thresh it. See that one with the water? It was so hot in them fields you'd have to have water. Only thing better was buttermilk from the spring house. Well, that's the old spring house. Small as it was, that little house was important. It had a trough through there, a box with cold spring water flowing through it. Kept our milk and butter and cider cold. We made cider in the summer and sauerkraut, packed them in jars for the winter. We'd talk Ma into peeling some of the cabbage cores, put them in there with the kraut. In the winter, we'd dig them out and eat them. That was as good as candy to us. We'd butcher the hogs and maybe get a little beef, salt it down. All that stuff we'd store in that little house. It'd be packed full for the winter months. Coming in from a hot field, nothing tasted better than to go in that spring house, dip up a gourd full of fresh, cold buttermilk from the stoneware churn. The money crop was cotton. When we'd gather it, we'd tie a big apron around us and fill that. Sometimes, though, we'd have a sack, strap it around our shoulders, and fill it full. Then the workers and us would dump our loads into a sheet. It was usually full of little kids and dogs. We'd haul that sheet to the wagon and dump it in there. We'd get about 5 cents a pound, make about 5 bales, and a good bale would be about 400 pounds. In the fall, we made molasses. Molasses making now, that was bad. We was all kept busy, some carrying the cane to the mill, one keeping the fire going, one feeding the cane into the mill, while that old mule kept going round and round. He never got anywhere, but got that cane ground to make the molasses. We'd have to use them old paddles to skim it. They was made out of tin and was full of little holes. The skim would stay on the paddles, while the molasses would drip through. If you tried to sweeten something with molasses, it wasn't fit to eat. Didn't sweeten it good like sugar. Ma would sometimes bake up molasses cake. Daddy liked that with his coffee. I never did like it. I got sick of it. A hot steam coming out on you. When it was over, Daddy'd haul it off in large barrels. Sold it for about 40 cents a gallon. Daddy made ware in his spare time. Most folks these days call it pottery. Jars, jugs, and such. We just called it ware. But Daddy made ware in his spare time. A lot of men through here did. Zeb Ritchie and his daddy, Monroe, Jim Lynn, Jay Probst and his son. Don't know where they learned it. Guess they passed it down the generations, father to son, like my daddy did to my brother, Robert. Robert threw for him a lot. I tell you, them potter's wheels was kept busy. It wasn't easy making pottery. First, you'd have to hunt down the stream beds, find a bank of clay, take a pick and dig out them chunks of clay, and take it and put it in the clay mill and grind it real smooth. Then you throw a mess of that clay onto the potter's wheel and start turning. When it was the shape and size you wanted, you'd coat it with sand, good smooth sand. That was to make the glaze and keep it from seeping water. After that, you had to pack it in the kiln and heat it really hot for a couple of days. The sand on the jars would melt and look like it had been coated with glass. I remember helping carrying out the old groundhog kiln, my younger brother and me. You'd have to get way down in there. We were small. We could walk up nearly straight. Your feet would nearly burn up a carrying it out. Daddy'd haul his ware packed in straw in his covered wagon. He'd haul it off toward Blowing Rock, trade it for cabbage and apples, Irish potatoes and chestnuts, whatever they grow up there. Sometimes he'd take a load to Charlotte in South Carolina. He'd trade it mostly. Back then there wasn't much money. My daddy stayed on the road a lot. It was hard work. About the only fun thing we had was going to a corn shucking in the fall. People would gather their corn, haul it in their wagons and pile it up, generally wait till the next day. Then they'd go out and invite the whole country round. Going to have a corn shucking. Next morning, you'd commence to killing chickens and baking pies and cooking for the corn shucking. Everybody would come and sit like in that painting and shuck the corn, throwing the shuck behind them and the corn in front. Men were always trying to find a red ear. You got to kiss your special girl if you found one. Whew, corn shucking was a family affair. And while the grown-ups was shucking, the young'uns was picking out their pumpkins for their jack-o'-lanterns. It'd last from about 7 to 11, with that big old yeller moon shining down on them. Oh, now that was fun, corn shucking. I guess I was about 7-year-old when I started school. We started long about September, go maybe 6 months. Sometimes not that much schooling in a year. Walked about 3 miles to Hog Hill School, crossed a foot log. It was wet and slick, and sometimes it'd be froze over and we'd fall in. There weren't no school buses in them days. It'd be so cold walking that long way. At that time, there was about half a dozen in the family going to school. We'd carry our food in a big, round, homemade basket. We all ate out of that one basket. It was about all one could do to carry that basket. We'd have sweet potatoes and fried pies made out of the apples we had dried that fall. Sometimes we'd have a little sausage. That was mostly in the winter after we'd butchered the hogs. That school had 2 doors. One the boys went in and one the girls. They didn't let us sit together. That's my old friend Charlie Hood sitting and eating his lunch in one of the doorways. Took him a whole hour to eat. He had a big tin bucket, and he'd sit there and eat till they rang the bell for books. We had slates, and I could draw snow pictures on the slate with chalk. I could draw good pictures of snow on my slate. That's all I was interested in. All I wanted to do was to sit of drawing pictures. I didn't learn much in a book. They didn't have any grades. You just go along as you wanted to till you quit. Sometimes they'd make up, and they'd have a little summer school, maybe about 6 weeks to a month or so. But most of us had to work in the fields in the summer. I quit when I was 16-year-old. Then I met Belton Reinhardt. Got married about 1921. He'd been back a while from the war, the first one, World War I. We lived on here with my dad and mother, took care of them until they died. After I got older, I didn't think about drawing much. Had to help with the farm and raise a family. We raised 5 girls and 1 boy. Takes a lot for that many, and I didn't have time to think about my pretty snow pictures. In 1974, when I was about 77, I had my eyes operated on for cataracts. I was almost blind. I couldn't tell green from blue. After that operation, everything looked so pretty and bright. I told my daughter, Ari, I believe I'll go to painting pictures. That Christmas, she bought me some paints. I didn't know nothing about paints, never had any. I got me a book, told how to mix and make different colors. Then I just used my own imagination, what I thought looked right, and I sat down and started on it. I painted what I remembered, and I can remember how a lot of that old stuff looked. Our home place, Dad plowing in the spring, all that. I like putting buildings and animals in my paintings. I think they look more alive, like Corinth Church, which I joined when I was 14. I saw it change 5 times. Started off as a brush arbor, and it was just Grandma and a few others. Then they built a little log building, had a door in one end and a window in the other. Then they built a plank church. We thought we had a fine church then. They tore that one down and built a rock one. Then it was torn down for a brick one. I'd say I like that plank one the best. They'd preach till about 12 o'clock, then they'd go out and had their food and whatever else in their wagons. They'd put it all out on that big, long table. And old members, some of them lived way off, maybe in another state, they'd come back for this, all dressed up in the best they had. And I remember our friend, Possum John Rudisell. He lived with his 3 sisters in a one-room cabin. They slept in one end and cooked in the fireplace in the other end. I went there a lot of times coming from school. Them sisters would make me buckwheat pancakes, made from the buckwheat they raised and cut with a knife. Possum John never worked. He hunted possum all the time in the winter, and in the summer he'd fish, while his sisters cooked, cleaned, and cut wheat. I don't know how he always got away with that not doing any work. He sure loved to play the banjo, though. Lord, he could make that banjo talk. I keep it painting all the time. I don't never get tired of it. I never took a lesson. There didn't nobody show me, 'cause mine's my style. Theirs is theirs. You paint the way you see it. That's the best way. There's not anybody that paints, I don't think, that saw what I saw. Like cutting wheat, picking cotton, making molasses and all that stuff. I went through all that. If you didn't go through it, you wouldn't know how to paint it. I was just real interested in it. You can't do nothing without being interested and wanting to do it more than anything else. That's the main thing. I like to do it as good as the day I started. Last Christmas, my family brought me brushes and paint. Oh, all colors, a box full. I'll never need another bit. I'll paint as long as I can hold a brush in my hand. It makes me feel good that people like my pictures. It makes me feel good.